Hello, folks. This is Andrew Gilmore with another episode of Mostly Movies, Maybe Music. And if you're looking at the video feed, you'll see we have 5 people on the show, so this is a big one today. And this is part 2 of our tribute to the comedy team of Wheeler and Woolsey. That's Bert Wheeler and Robert Woolsey. And you should probably check out the first part that we did before you look at this. But we had a conversation here a few months ago about them, and I should mention my friends Anthony Gargano and Brian Paige who are here. They were on that show with me, and we also had the honor of having Bert Wheeler's great grandson Patrick Laurence with us, who is here again. And I'll introduce our other guest in a minute. There's a fifth person there. But Brian and Anthony and Patrick and I did a show a few months ago, and that was fun. And then after the show, Brian texted me and he said that he felt that we had just scratched the surface, that there was a lot more Wheeler and Woolsey stuff to talk about. So we all agreed to come back here and continue and have more conversation on that subject. And I should mention our other guest is my friend Paul Castiglia from New Jersey. Last time I mentioned where everybody was from, but I'll mention Paul is from New Jersey and is a writer and film historian. Used to be a comic book writer. I don't know if he's still doing that. He's a songwriter as well. So he's a man of many talents. And I know he's a Wheeler and Woolsey fan, so I invited him. And he was supposed to be here the last time, but had a schedule conflict. But today he's here, so we've got a whole gang of Wheeler and Woolsey fans to talk to. So that'll be interesting. And I should mention a couple of things here before we get into the conversation. One is that the other reason I wanted to do this is because the Wheeler and Woolsey episode was actually one of the highest rated shows that I've done. I just looked at YouTube this morning, and it has we're up to 163 views, which is it's not the same as getting 163,000 views like other people, but by my standards, that's actually the third highest rated episode of this show that I've done. So I've gotten a lot of feedback on it. A lot of people saw it, and so why not continue? If that's what's popular, then uh, why not have a part two? So there's that. And I should also mention that based on the popularity of that, Brian and Anthony and I have started recording a podcast as a trio, which is called Classic Comedy Conversations, where one of us will pick a classic comedy movie on each show to talk about. And we've just recorded the first three episodes of that, and those have been pretty good. We've had some special guests with us on those shows, and that'll be. I'm delaying the posting of those, but because of scheduling. But the first episode will be out on August 22nd, so you'll see that pretty soon. And that's going in a good direction. The three of us have been exchanging a lot of text messages, bouncing a lot of ideas off of each other, and the first 3 shows were good, and we have a lot of good ideas planned for that in the future. So that's the second podcast I'll be doing in addition to this show. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded introduction. I think that covers just about everything that I need to talk about. So thank you all for being with me, guys. I'm sure this will be fun. So, Paul, since this is your first time, I know I've been trying to get you on here for a while, and why don't we start with you? Why don't you just tell me some of your background in terms of watching classic comedy, and then how you got to Wheeler and Woolsey?
Oh wow. So, oh man, I caught the classic comedy bug young. I remember watching on TV, when you live in North Jersey, you get New York City television. So we had three great independent stations that were always showing classic films. Now, I was born in 1966, so my TV memories start around 1970. And there was always Laurel and Hardy, there was always Abbott Costello. You could catch the Marx Brothers, W.C. Fields. Later on, the Three Stooges came into the mix. So I was like fascinated by these classic comedians from a young age. My town library was a wonderful place that had books on all the classic comedians, as well as audio cassettes and record albums of the comedians when they did radio broadcasts and Super 8 and 8 millimeter films. It turns out there was a fellow working there named George Erling, who was a young man who was into all this stuff, and he was also a cartoonist. So he ended up teaching cartooning classes at the library. So I always tell George, my origin story is that he created me because of all of what he did at the library to bring classic comedy and all these things like animation and comics into my purview. But I would say with Wheeler and Woolsey, it was due to the Leonard Maltin book, Classic Comedy Teams, which I had picked up I don't remember when I picked it up. It was when they had the like signet sized paperbacks, the like little thin ones. I'm not even sure if they do that format anymore, but I was just obviously I knew Laurel and Hardy, Abbott Costello, Stooges, Marx Brothers, but like who is this Wheeler and Woolsey and all these others? And I was just fascinated by what Leonard wrote. And through the years, I really didn't have access to Wheeler and Woolsey until probably about maybe 26 years ago. I had picked up some of the public domain stuff, and a friend of mine had made a video on YouTube, which was sort of a compilation of scenes set to music of Will and Woolsey. And I'm like, yeah, I really like this. So I reached out to them, and they said, "Oh, I'll copy all this stuff off of my DVR." I took it all off of Turner Classic Movies, and they sent me everything. And so I took the deep dive then. Since then, I've collected, the official releases from Warner Archives. I bought the great Ed Watts book on Wheeler and Woolsey, and I still watch them when they come on TCM or whenever I can, and they're just there's something different about them that I like, So yeah, I got into Wheeler and Woolsey, hook, line, and sinker, if you will.
Yes. Do you have a favorite film of theirs?
Yes, the Nitwits.
Yeah.
I say with no hesitation. Just something about that film, and I know it comes later, and it's after all the pre-code stuff, but there's an energy to it that I really love. It also has this spooky element. One of my projects that I've been working on is a book called Scared Silly, where I take a look at classic comedy films where comedians get mixed up in spooky situations. So that slots right into that. It's also the blueprint for probably the best Abbott Costello film, at least in my opinion, Who Done It, which maybe we could talk about at some
Right.
point.
That
But
was
I don't
something.
want to use up the introduction here.
Well, that
So
was something Brian wanted to talk about. So you
yeah,
go ahead and talk about the similarities there.
absolutely. Was it Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Brian. Yeah, I mean, really, right? You could see it in the film. It's the way the setup is. So Wheeler and Woolsey are working at the bottom of this huge office building, right? And what are they doing? The little cigar stand and tchotchkes and stuff.
Yeah.
And upstairs is the music publishing company, and there's a murder, and they insinuate themselves into the investigation. And who done it? Abbott Costello are working, as soda jerks at the bottom of a big business building. There's a big radio station above them. There's a murder, and they insinuate themselves into the investigation. I mean, it's uncanny the setup, and also includes the same handcuff scene that is in both films. It's very it's maybe performed a little bit differently in each film, but the basics of it are there. So it always struck me that wow, and in reading a book about Abbott Costello, actually a book a friend of mine wrote, Bob Furmanek, and Ron Palumbo wrote a book, Abbott Costello in Hollywood, years ago, and they mentioned that Abbott Costello's producer, Alex Gottlieb, had basically written down a bunch of scenarios from Wheeler and Woolsey movies as possible,
Hmm.
story springboards for Abbott Costello films. And I think it's probably most evident in Who Done It.
yeah, I have that book by Palumbo and Furmanek, and just now as you were describing the similarities between the two, I think that probably has a lot to do with it. I think especially back then when they didn't have home video, they were able to say, "Hey, like let's look over these old Wheeler and Woolsey scripts. They're not like out there anymore. They're not really showing that often in like, retro theaters and stuff. And I'm sure they did pillage some stuff from there.
And,
Absolutely.
and that's how they could get away with, in general, in classic comedy films and even animated shorts. It's how they could get away with repeating gags and scenarios
Uh,
because someone wasn't going to remember from 6 months to a year before. Oh, I already saw this in a different Three Stooges short or in a different Bugs Bunny cartoon.
right.
They're not going to remember. It wasn't like seeing it all the time on TV. You watch them bunched together in a TV broadcast, and you said, "Wow, it's kind of repetitious," but it wasn't. in
back then.
its original format of being released theatrically,
Right.
for sure. I mean, and the last third of the Nitwits goes in a completely different direction than Whodunit goes in. But
I think Nitwits has the better climax, quite frankly.
yeah, it's the one that George Stevens cribbed from one of his boyfriend
Boyfriend
shorts,
shorts. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's hilarious. I mean, the film has, some racial stuff in it, which
Right.
is
Yeah,
not really PC now, but all the
right.
performers are in there giving it their all, and there's some really funny bits in it. Uh,
Definitely.
and some charming bits too. You're never going to find a more charming scene than Wheeler and Woolsey on the stilts going to the jail
I
and
love that. Yeah.
singing up to the window, right? So,
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to think. I was I think that one advantage that Nitwits has over Whodunit as well. When I watch Whodunit, I can never remember who the actual killer is.
I agree,
Nitwits is a better
Brian.
mystery.
Like the Black Widow is such a way better villainous
Yeah.
character to me than anything like that in Whodunit. And that's actually my brother's favorite Wheeler and Woolsey movie as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
the biggest mystery in whodunit is who is the killer and why.
it's just a
It is
Yeah.
random some
it's just
guy.
really randomly dropped in, but there's so much comedy and energy in that film that it's almost like you don't care, you know.
Yeah. No, I agree. We were thinking about that sort of a whodunit versus nitwits sort of scenario, and I agree. The mystery in the nitwits is so much better. It's so much better. The film itself, because what Stevens does is he pretty much gives you a Hollywood noir kind of thriller mystery, and then he puts Wheeler and Woolsey as actors, and by then they had, especially Bob. Bert was natural right away in Rio Rita. He was like born to be a showman. Bob was a little tight, a little bit more rigid, but man, he became a better actor with each film. And by the Nitwits, they're both giving such good performances, and they're funny and charming. And so you've got them doing their Wheeler and Woolsey stuff, but integrated super well into George Stevens' kind of dark mystery. So to me, it's the better film. But Paul, as you said, Abbott and Costello in Who Done It, their energy, because they were right out of the gate. It was like their first few years on screen. Their energy is just like incredible.
Well, they were
So
let loose without musical support this time,
yeah,
right? So I
yeah,
think they took as much advantage as possible. And in the Nitwits, you have, Betty Grable filling in for Dorothy West, and
Dorothy Lee.
while Dorothy Lee, rather, pardon me, Dorothy Lee, and we always love seeing Dottie, but I think
Yeah,
Betty Grable was a
he was
good,
fine.
second choice, right? And she was in Hold'em Jail as well,
Yep.
so it not a bad trade-off if you can't get Dottie for this film with Let's Call Betty. Works
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah,
definitely.
Paul, I would be curious. Do you feel, I mean, it was a post-code film, but it's also one of your favorites. So, in your opinion, did they experience a drop off after the code, or did they just sort of transition pretty well to other genres? I mean, obviously, there's more like kid-friendly stuff. They moved on to some of the Mummy's Boys and Nitwits and the scary stuff. How did they survive that, in your opinion?
I mean, it's hard to say. I guess the films were still doing relatively well financially, but Bob was getting sick, right? And
Right,
I think there's a lot of people who are not really fond of Fred, is it Weil
right, right, right,
taking
right.
over for Stevens. I did manage to reacquaint myself with Mummy's Boys before this, and I think it's better than its reputation.
Yeah,
But all of these films, like any of these classic films, you can say, well, this one's objectively better than the other. But then the counterpoint to that is, what do I like subjectively? Right.
right,
And because I'm such a sucker for horror comedies,
right,
maybe I grade Mummy's Boys on more of a curve than other
right.
people.
Exactly. That's what I
It
was getting
certainly is it kind of falls right in line with the Stooges. We want our mummy. And, predicts a very similar ending to Abbott Costello Meet the Mummy. So, you
Right.
know, so I mean, but yeah, I think their time, yeah, I think there probably was a lot of, oh, we can't do these double entendres anymore like we used to, which may have thrown them for a little bit. They're such professionals that, they still have some life left in them in those last few films, in my opinion.
Sure. No, I
No,
mean
they
they
do.
had so much talent, right? I mean, it wasn't just the banter and the double entendres. They could dance, they could sing, all that stuff.
Mhm.
And that's sort of the one thing that I admire looking back on these films. It's just how much diversity they have and different abilities. And so even though, those more, uh, you know, sultry jokes were removed after the code, I thought they did pretty well. And on top of that, having to deal with Bob's illness, for them to keep going like they did, to me is pretty impressive. And your favorite films post code, right? So
Yeah, and I mean the thing about that is, with a lot of these teams, there's different eras, right? I mean, it's very
sure.
similar with Laurel and Hardy. Laurel and Hardy start out in Silence very more adult. They have some double entendres. They're dealing with more adult situations, and then towards the end, at least of their Hal Roach run, they're more playing to children. And then the 40s films are kind of a mix of things for them. But I always think of Will and Woolsey that way. They start off as, you know, the comedy relief guys who can also do song and dance as backups in musicals. Then they get to do their own thing.
Right.
And then at some point, they become what I like to refer to as we don't give an F. Like in other words, by that I mean is, even the Marx Brothers, they always say the Marx Brothers are the most anarchic, but in Duck Soup, Groucho has to feel like he's insulted, and that starts the war. And Will and Woolsey have some films where they're just going to mess with you for the sake of messing with you. A lot like Heckle and Jekyll in the cartoons. Like they're just going to mess with you for the sake of messing. They don't need. It's not Bugs Bunny, of course. This means war. And then they kind of settle down a little bit. When I'm thinking of things like Hips Hips Hooray and Diplomaniacs, where all bets are off, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and I love that. And then they calm down a little bit. And then they have those moments in between where they try different things like pathos and caught plastered, which I think is good. But I do like where they landed postcode. I do think it was the right mix at that time, and yeah, I mean, how many people? You could be scuttled very easily. Buster Keaton really didn't adjust uh, to sound easily. Laurel and Hardy did. And I think Will and Woolsey also adjusted to being post code.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, there's our awkward pause for this week.
Yeah. I don't want to do all the talking, guys.
Well, I think Mummy's Boys would be better off if it was one of the ones you saw a little earlier.
Yeah.
Because like once if you've watched these in order, at that point you're gonna realize, okay, how many do we need to hear the crow flies again?
Yeah.
Do we need to hear like they were just repeating themselves by that point, I felt like in some ways, and like they kind of got the air that they were just out of ideas a little bit by that film, I think. I don't and
Yeah.
that
The middle. It's like, and that's one of the things Paul and I have in common is we both like when comedy is bounced against the really dark subplot or even supernatural or some sort of horror element. And in Mummy's Boys, all of that is right. Like the atmosphere and mood. I have to admit, Fred Gill, Guil, whatever, I'm going to just say Gill because I think that's what I heard the most often. But Fred Gill does all of that nicely. But the problem is, it feels kind of like they're like, okay, we've got all these horror elements, we've got the atmosphere, we've got the sets, everything looks great in the film. Bert and Bob, okay, you guys are good. Yeah, can you work with the writers over lunch and come up with some stuff? And it's like, that's the biggest problem, Mummy's Boys, is the humor doesn't balance out enough in that film because you're not the scene where Bob does interrogation in the hotel room. That should have been so much funnier, but it feels like they just were like, Bob, come up with something on the fly, and he's like, you know.
I think that's
So
common for the comedians in their latter day films. Just about anyone you could think of. It's true. And Mummy's Boy, has really kind of a long stretch
that's
in the
my
middle that's a little
yeah,
tedious.
that's my biggest problem with it.
As tedious as the battle I just lost against the humidity with my hair. So yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, what do you are you guys familiar with The Longest Yard,
I've never seen
1970s
it.
Burt Reynolds film?
Burt Reynolds. I know of it. I've never seen it.
It's Hold'em Jail.
Really?
That's another thing I want to mention. If you
Sure.
watch those films, full disclosure, I have an older sister, and she wanted to go see The Other Side of the Mountain at the drive-in when it came out, and the second feature was The Longest Yard. So, unbeknownst to me, that night when I was 6 or 7 or 8 years old, whatever I was the first night I saw an R-rated film.
Ah,
Not intentionally, but it's the same story. It's wardens at rival prisons are holding the big football game. It's the same thing, and people don't talk about it. And they even remade that film with Adam Sandler at one point.
Yeah,
But I feel like people need to know, hey, that was a Wheeler and Woolsey movie.
right.
And
What year was that? What year did the Burt Reynolds film come out? Was that the
yeah,
70s?
1974.
yeah. Was it
Yeah,
73, 74, something like
right.
that?
Right. So no one's going to remember like that. That was the exact time period where there was no real ability to sequel
Yeah,
films.
yeah. They were
If you're
kind
in the
of
know, you could, crib stuff from it, and no one's going to know the difference.
Yeah, I don't think they were trying to rip them off. I mean, I think they just came up with a different scenario that
Yeah,
happened.
I would never say it's a ripoff. I'd never say any of these things are ripoffs unless it's something really blatant, because there's always uh, very similar ideas that people come up with all the time. It's just something that happens with the creative process. And I could be sitting here in New Jersey right now and come up with an idea for a film, not knowing that somebody in Alaska has got the almost identical idea for a film that I have. It just happens. It's part of the
Right.
creative process. But it
Well,
is very much very similar.
I mean, there's some different. I mean, like in that movie, like both versions of Longest Yard, like the main character is an NFL quarterback that has some incident that happens where he ends up in prison. And it's more like that, but like it's not like it's doing a college spoof sort of thing, like Hold'em Jail is.
No,
Or it's like an
no.
allegory for like college
But
football.
now, granted, I haven't seen The Longest Yard since I was in that drive-in, so I'm just going by the basic premise. And also don't have the brutal slapstick assault on Edgar Kennedy that we get in Hold'em Jail, which might be the most violent Wheeler and Woolsey film.
Really, you mentioned that. Is that movie? Does anybody think that Hold'em Jail is really that much of a pre-code sort of movie?
I can
Not
think of.
really. It doesn't lean into it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
No. I was trying to remember it. There's nothing that stands out like certain lines from other movies do, certainly.
Well, there's the
But
line
no,
where Edna Mae Oliver says, "I'm not a virtuoso." There's the joke on that.
yeah, there's that.
Yeah,
That's
it's lighter though, for sure,
Yeah.
on the innuendos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, I think
No,
that maybe one area where it would still be considered pre-code and not be made later is that they wouldn't want the warden to be the butt of a joke
Oh, you're
because they
probably
wouldn't want
right.
that
Yeah.
authority figure kind of thing treated in that way. The code did a lot of different things like that.
Yep.
That's why I
Mm.
put down a crackdown on it. But
Now we mentioned so this is Africa.
Mhm.
And I forget now if this was Brian or Anthony.
Oh, I should mention we were talking about that before we went on the air.
yeah.
Yeah, oh, we were talking about that before we went on the air. So somebody recently pulled up the article. I'd read the article a while back about all the things that were cut,
Yeah.
at least from the script, if not from the footage itself. Um, does anybody have that handy to talk about? Or
Not right here in front of me, but I remember reading it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so, are you referring to the gentleman sharpen your scissors article or whatever
Right.
online?
That's the
yes,
title.
that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I don't know what was cut out of the script, but I don't think that the actual film itself really had as much edited out as reported. Because I can't imagine that movie being 90 minutes long.
Exactly. I've been
There
saying
Yeah.
would be
that.
like so much. You
Yeah,
cut entire things out of the movie if you're
they
90
didn't.
minutes to 65 or whatever.
I can almost guarantee that movie was not nine. There was no Wheeler and Woolsey film over 70 something minutes except for the big musical ones. There's
Right.
no way so Columbia was like, oh, let's give them an hour and a half film. It was probably about 70 to 75 minutes. If you watch the film, you see the cuts because they're like an old print from television cuts. Like it feels more like they're just there's like missing frames or something. It's badly cut because they couldn't get Burton back for retakes because they were already back in our at RKO. There, I agree 100%. There's no way that was 90
I
minutes.
think I did the math using like some online tool for like film reels or whatever and how much. And I did it. Like, I figured out that they maybe cut 4 minutes out or something of total film.
Yeah,
It was like
Yeah,
yeah.
a 69 minute.
that seems reasonable to me. I mean, what's interesting about that film is I do think it, and this just may be me, but I do think it feels like an RKO film.
Hmm.
You know, I
To
was
me,
watching
not
it.
so much.
I was looking at it. Just the feeling of them getting mixed up. It was making me think of Diplomaniacs in a lot of ways. Some of the tone and essence of it.
Yeah, that those two movies are done with their most completely out there, anarchistic, wild, you
Yeah.
know.
Diplomaniacs is the when I talk to people about Diplomaniacs, I say it's the most politically incorrect film you'll ever see.
Yeah.
However,
Not that same version.
it's satire, and you know, you have to be able to go in for the ride or not, and that's up to each individual person. Because if we look at Jonathan Swift, right? I mean, you have to become the thing that you're mocking, and I think the idea wasn't to say let's just mock everybody, but isn't it ridiculous to mock everybody? I think that's in there. I don't think the intent is to just be mean to everybody that is their target in the movie, because everybody gets targeted in the movie. I really think it's less that. It's my personal read on it.
Hmm.
I love it. It's one of my, I would say probably my top five would be, we talked about Hip Sips Array, but Cockeyed Cavaliers, Nitwits, Diplomaniacs. It's tough because I have a real soft spot for Cracked Nuts because of the setting and their performances. It's like everything, everything is so good in that film, except you get the feeling like the writers ran out of material. So like everything else is firing on all cylinders. Edna Mae Oliver's amazing. She's stealing one scene after another. Bert and Bob, apart, do really nice work, and then when they come together, it's like the boys are back in town. But that's another film where you feel like the material is just a little too thin, and some of the editing in that film, some of it could be a little tighter.
Yeah.
But oh man, it's like that's sort of more like a dark horse for me, you
Yeah,
know?
I agree. I don't think you can have Diplomaniacs without Cracked Nuts.
No.
So,
Yeah.
it's kind of a stepping stone. I mean, even Diplomaniacs, I mean, the amount of time on the reservation with really, kind of groaner jokes is
Right.
is not great. But then once they're on the boat, all bets are off, and it just becomes this wild, wild thing. I think that's a common thing in the Wheeler and Woolsey. You're going to get the groaners in there, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's funny when they're bad puns, bad
Yeah.
jokes.
Yeah, I was
Hopefully
thinking.
everything's going to be oil right.
Yeah, yeah.
So what about my favorite horrible joke?
Sorry, Patrick had something to say.
Well, I mean, just the groaners, and not to, I don't want to necessarily seg to O Cleopatra, which we should probably have such a groundbreaking.
We actually had a request to talk about Oh
Yeah,
Cleopatra, so
but specifically with respect to the groaners and the Lion's Den joke and O Cleopatra, like the lions now are not like the lions den or whatever.
Yeah.
It was so bad that even Bob and Bert sort of like recoiled from it in the film, which
Oh,
I
they
thought was
it broke the crew.
funny.
They're on camera, like they break. Yeah, like they absolutely hell.
It was such a but it's funny, right? It is funny, but it was to me it's maybe there are other examples where it's so corny that they
I'm
actually physically recoil against it.
I'm glad you brought up Oh Cleopatra, Patrick, because I wanted to ask you before anyone else.
Right.
Because we did have the request, someone actually said, I loved your first
Yeah.
podcast on Wheeler and Woolsey, but I was surprised you guys didn't bring this up. But I wanted to ask you, Patrick, did you notice Bert is not, like I said in the first podcast, watching Bert and Bob, it's always like watching Big Brother, Little Brother. Did you
Right.
notice how Bert would not take sort of any um crap from Bob at all in that film? Every single thing Bob tried to do to him or push back.
Right.
I was like, I gotta ask Patrick how he feels because Bert, man,
Yeah.
Bert comes out like I'm the Irish kid from New Jersey. Like you're not playing
Right.
with me this time,
Right. 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 Yeah, I guess that's true. And I suppose part of that is the competition over Cleopatra, right? They're both
Yeah,
vying for attention and who's going to win her. I mean, that's the whole film. The chariot race is who's going to win her hand. But yeah, I think we talked about this last time, how they both get along on screen, but there are a few times where they're pitted against each other. I think on again, off again is an example of
Yeah.
that. Oh, Cleopatra. Yeah, I see that too. Um, I just remember, it wasn't too long ago where we weren't even sure that there was a copy available. Back
yeah,
when Ed Watts wrote his book, it was just this mysterious thing that maybe it was out there, and there was some unknown, unnamed collector who I think we now know who he is, in New England who may have had a copy. It was just this mysterious thing. And then how strange it is that suddenly it just pops up on YouTube where the whole world can watch it.
yeah,
And how awesome that was to be able to do that, and to splice it together and make it work. That was great. It was just such a mystery for a long time. And just real quick, because I do think we need to dive into that. I'd like to see small timers be discovered
Oh
again,
yeah.
mm,
because I mean that's a very personal. Those are Bernice and Bert are both in that film, and I'd love to see them. I'd love
yeah.
to see the visual elements. We have the audio elements, so that's great.
Yep.
I really hope that film gets discovered one day. But Cleopatra, so awesome that we can all see that now.
Yeah. Shout out to our friend Paul Clark for putting that online for everybody.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yep.
right.
That for a long time, that and the missing pieces of Rio Rita have been sort of
Right.
the holy grail for all of us fans. And I remember they first released the audio for Oh Cleopatra, right? It was just the
Right.
audio, and then
Right.
like maybe a year later, finally the visual. And what I like about, I mean, it feels like Bert and Bob. What I like about Bert and Bob, they're sort of like the Larry David version of themselves, like Larry David and Curb. Your Enthusiasm is kind of Larry David, but not really. He's also not the real him, but he's sort of a
Right.
character. And Bert and Bob are kind of playing somewhere between the characters. We've seen them in films before, and the real Bert and Bob. I feel, it's like when they're at the actual club with James Finlayson and Hale Hamilton and everyone. And then when they go into the, Mark Anthony and Julius Caesar stuff, they really go toe to toe. Bert is not backing down, and it's so much fun to watch them work off each other in that way. Hail to Julius Caesar, well, hail to you, well,
Right, right, right,
hail
right,
to you
right.
too.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And at one point, I wonder if you guys go back and watch it. At the very end, after the chariot race, when they both run to Cleopatra, and Bert puts his head like near on her pelvis, Bob looks up and like kind of smacks his face away, like it's really aggressive. And Bob just says, "Get away from there," kind of under his breath. And I'm like, I think that was probably improvised because Bert looked really surprised that Bob did it. I was like, whoa, what just happened there,
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And then I just recalled that the scene where earlier they were slapping each other, and that kept
yeah,
going for a while. It kept
yeah,
slap,
yeah.
slap, slap, slap. It kept going for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
They
But
did
you
a
never.
yeah, they
Oh,
did a
just
few of their routine. Like that was the real
Yeah.
Rita slap routine. And then they also I
Yeah.
heard a little bit of Half Shot of
Right.
Sunrise in there as well. The nyak nyak
yes, yes.
was in there during the chariot. But
They're a little. Yeah. I think.
watching I actually went back and watched it this the other day. And I think well, one, it made me want to see that be a real movie because I think they fit those roles perfectly.
Yeah.
Like if you were going to do that, and but yeah, it made me think. I don't think that they would not be ideal two reeler kind of comedians though. I think they're just better as feature films.
See, I was going to go the opposite
They
and
got
say
to warm
that
you up.
I think it showed that they could really kind of light up in short form, at a crazy pace and a crazy energy and just that rapid fire give and take would be interesting. I would like to have seen more. I love the features.
Yeah.
There are some that drag. So I mean, of course, I want to have the best of all worlds. I want shorts and features.
Yeah.
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 Part of me thinks that had they done more, I mean, Bert did so, I think it was some Columbia two reelers in the
Hmm.
50s, which some people don't like them, but I often wonder had they made some of those shorts, whether it would have been more compatible with TV. I mean, not to open that can of worms. Why are Wheeler and Woolsey not as well known today? Considering they were world famous in the 30s. Like that was the biggest eye opener to me is these guys were famous. What happened to the point where I didn't even know who my own great grandfather was growing up. But I do think had they made some more shorts, that's what I was watching. In LA, you mentioned New Jersey TV, New York TV. It was KTLA, Channel 5, Family Film Festival. And what they were showing was, Little Rascals, Our Gang, the Three Stooges. They would show some feature-length films. I remember falling in love with the Road 2 movies with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. I love those films. But I always felt like if Bert and Bob had made some shorter films, like maybe they would have gotten more TV time. I don't know. But I do feel like that's a big reason why they sort of fell off is that no one was watching them on TV during that critical 60s, 70s time period.
I think
Uh,
too that maybe there was just the idea in broadcasters' heads that, what can we easily slot into a time slot where children may be watching
yes.
and what's safer versus what might be a little more iffy, you know?
Exactly. I mean, it seems like I think even Brian, you talked about did you have to stay up till like 2 in the morning to watch some of these films? There was probably a reason, I mean,
Oh,
why they showed at those times. But to your point, Paul, that is what they're right. So KTLA would be it was Family Film Festival, right? They're not going to show Peach Arena with the double entendres and stuff at that time. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, I
Is
mean, I would have been into girls way sooner than I was if Hips Hips Hooray was on Channel 11 at
yeah,
11 a.m. on a Sunday morning,
right.
like an Abbott Costello film.
Right. No, that's definitely a part of it too. But then you say, why not the postcode stuff? The
Yeah.
Kentucky Colonels with Spanky McFarlane. But anyways, yeah. I like their shorter stuff. Bert's stuff that he did for Columbia is kind of more slapstick and silly, but I liked it. I thought they were funny.
Yeah, Columbia definitely had their style. It was hard to bring your style to a Columbia short, I think,
Right.
and pull it off. So that Bert survived those and did so in fine fashion. Just shows you how great Bert was.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a reason that you know of why he only did two shorts at Columbia? Was it just a contractual thing and they didn't want him to do more?
Yeah, my recollection was it's been a while, but it was almost as if somebody went, I forget the guy who connected him, but I think James Nybauer talks about this. It was almost a favor. But I don't know. I should just say it. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, those are it is interesting seeing Bert in Columbia shorts at that time and his style of comedy integrated into the Columbia world. It's interesting. Columbia was such a weird place because they would give the comic a little bit of their own room, like Buster Keaton went over there for 10 shorts, right? They'd give them a little bit of their own room, but then everything else is so familiar, like what we've seen in the Stooges shorts and everything, especially by the 40s and 50s when Buster was over there, Langdon was over there, Bert was over there. Um, but as a teaser, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, especially Hips Hips Hooray, and some of the stuff about sort of their them falling out of popularity. Yesterday, Andrew, you don't mind me mentioning our
No, I mentioned the other show in my
okay.
introduction. So
Well, each one of us had a pick for the first round. My pick was Hips Hips Hooray. So we have an hour and I think 40-minute podcast coming in about a month on Hips Hips Hooray, but we cover a lot of other Wheeler and Woolsey stuff too. So
Good.
I don't want to spoil anything and give out any of the stories we talked about, but I think you guys will, Paul and Patrick, you guys are going to really enjoy that.
yeah, that'll be out September 19th.
Right.
Looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
it's a
Yeah, it's
lot.
almost
Yeah,
cool to not talk about Cockeyed Cavaliers when you're
yeah,
talking Ray. Those movies go together as the two Mark Sandrich was,
Right.
and they just fit perfectly together, I think.
Yeah,
Have all of us seen Wheeler and Woolsey on the big screen? Because
Nope.
only once.
okay. I saw Hips. I mentioned last time I saw Hips Hips Hooray at Cinecon 2012, but I went back and read Ed Watts's book, and he said the first time he saw them was on the big screen in
mhm,
1978 at the in Manhattan Museum of Modern Art, and that for him is what flipped the lid because he saw how an audience reacted to their appearance on film, and that actually he pins that event as what caused him to write the book.
yeah,
Um, and I would say I had a similar experience, because, look, you get mixed reactions with Bert and Bob. Some people just don't like them. But for me, early on, this is in the beginning of sort of my rediscovery. When I saw them on the big screen, it is eye-opening. And I almost sense like you don't really know until you see how a real audience reacts to them on the big screen to sort of understand why they were so popular
Yeah.
because when just hearing that reaction at Hips Hips Hooray, it was shocking. Like, we've all had experiences, I think, and Andrew can speak to this, where you're just so disappointed
Hmm.
if people don't react well. That was such a great reaction, and I feel like, man, you almost need to see them on the big screen to really understand the appeal of it. But it's got to be a good picture, right? And it was Hips Hips Hooray in that case, and man, I just feel like if we all have the opportunity to be able to do that, I'd really like to see Cinecon show them again, in one of these upcoming shows because it was such a great experience.
Well, to that point, I think with any of these classic comedy films, it's really a collaboration between the comedians on screen and the people sitting in the audience. It really is. I've seen films with an audience that are considered lesser when you read the books. Our Wife, Laurel and Hardy short, considered lesser in the books. See it with an audience, the crowd erupts. They're in. They're all in.
Right,
Everybody's enjoying. I saw At the Circus with the Marx Brothers with an audience, which is heavily derided in a lot of the Marx fandom and scholarship, and the audience loved it. The audience in the theater loved it. So there's a different energy at play. You're seeing the performers larger than life on a big screen, and you're really brought into the world without any distractions. The world of the story of the film and the comedic performances that they're giving and jokes they're
right.
telling, sight gags they're pulling off, all of that. I think it really show classic comedy with an audience. I think you'll always win.
Well, I didn't realize that Our Wife was considered a lesser Laurel and Hardy because I showed it at a retirement home once, and the laughs were so huge that you couldn't even hear the soundtrack on the film. It was just a whole room full of people just howling. So that was
So
an amazing experience.
yeah, it is. These films come alive with audiences.
Yeah. And Patrick, I know I told you about this that I showed Picciarino in a museum, so it was on a big screen about a year and a half ago, and it was maybe 50 people in the audience, and they really liked it. They were laughing all through it. And after the screening, I said, "How about a hand for Wheeler and Woolsey?" And everybody applauded. So I did my
Yeah.
job. I got them out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if the movie watching experience, it's like half of it is actually what's being shown on the screen, half of it's experiencing it with other people. And that may even be why some comedies insert the laugh lines. Like they're trying to make up for that because you're watching, a satire at home and you hear the old laugh lines. Like, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
Inserting laughing over. I think it's to replicate that lost experience of watching something in a theater, and part of it may be like, hey, you need to be cued by somebody else. This is funny. Okay, pay attention. And we influence each other in how we're responding to things. So, and that was my experience is watching this stuff. It was like, hey, it's not just me. There's somebody else over there. I don't know who they are, but they're laughing the exact same lines.
Yeah.
And so that shared experience is if you can have that, I think it's great. I think it explains why they were so popular. You know, um, in the 30s, what people were experiencing. I was not to sort of go all over the place, but going back to So This Is Africa, that opening scene where they're about to jump from the windows, I mean, because they're out of work during the Great Depression,
Yeah.
that's deep, man. It's dark, but they're trying to represent that to the crowd at that time as something like they can approach that's funny, like, um, but to sort of go behind the screen and imagine like what people are experiencing as they're watching this, that's part of the story too. That's part of the appeal. Anyways, not to go too crazy with that, but I just love that showing back in 2012.
Yeah, that's awesome that you got to see that. Patrick, I did have one question that I had in mind. I know on the last podcast you said you haven't seen On Again, Off Again yet, right?
Yeah, right.
Which other ones have you not seen yet?
Good question.
So, yeah. So I haven't seen the Cuckoos.
Oh,
Okay.
I haven't seen Bob Woolsey's solo feature, Everything's Rosy.
mhm.
Mm,
I think I've seen parts of Girl Crazy.
okay.
Um, and I think I've seen parts of Silly Billies. I've seen parts, but I don't think I've seen the whole thing. I think I've
Okay.
seen everything else. Yeah, and
You can
there's
get
no
a
rhyme or reason to it. Usually it's availability or what have you.
you can get a
It's not
good
like that.
DVD of Peacherino and Girl Crazy. He's got on the same disc.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, Girl Crazy's really, if the musical numbers were not tampered with, Girl Crazy would probably be in my top five of theirs. I love Girl Crazy so much. I just don't like the way they they mess with the musical numbers and it's the only thing about that movie at all. Everything else is so watch Bert and Dorothy's song in that is so adorable.
Mhm.
It's so cute. It sucks that they restaged it.
Right.
Or I guess they used odd takes or whatever in the final product, but it is so charming.
Got it.
Yeah, it's so nice.
it's funny, like in the Wheeler Woolsey book, like there's like the implication that Selznick was trying to intentionally sabotage those 1932, the two they did that year to bury them in the eyes of RKO or whatever, make them worth less. I don't know. But then, like, if you take a look at a lot of his like independently produced stuff after he left MGM later, he kind of did the same thing. He
Really?
kind of ran up expenses all over the place. I mean, if you look at a lot of his Celtic International stuff, it lost a lot of it lost money. Other than like Gone with the Wind, obviously. But I mean, that was MGM co-produced. But yeah, he kind of had a habit of doing that, I think.
He David O. Sells. Yeah, he kind of I mean, his tinkering with the films caused a lot of problems. I mean, he notoriously said he didn't think Bert and Bob were funny on the set, I believe. And he would tinker with their films, run up costs. I think uh, Hold'em Jail was one where he just reworked it post production. There's another one I forget. He ran up costs, and I mean, I think that caused, in some ways, Bert and Bob to consider going to Columbia and to Paramount. And then they even had their falling out at that time. Bert and Bob did. I just feel like he didn't, David O. Sells, he didn't realize what they had. RKO, and I think RKO came around and said, well, wait a minute, we're not going to let these guys, even if you think they're not funny, they made money, right? That's undeniable. So we need to get them back. Yeah. I didn't realize he had caused problems elsewhere, though.
Speaking of which, if they were going to leave, should they have left at that point or maybe a little bit later than that? Because I'm thinking like about, because I mean, I wouldn't want them to leave RKO for good then, because then you're missing out on that 1934 run they had that was awesome. Because I mean, their best run was probably that Diplomaniacs through Nitwits, really. I mean, all through that. I mean, about after that's about where I think they needed to maybe look at Paramount or somebody who after that point the Marx Brothers had left for MGM and they could have slid right. There was a place for them to go right into Paramount, I think. But
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a moot point, which is unfortunate because of Bob's illness, though. So even if they had moved on at that point, we still would have only had gotten a few more out of them because of Bob, Unfortunately, which sucks. Because I've always wondered what would have happened next. I always wonder what would have happened if Bert and Bob went into the 40s.
You stole my question.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? That was one of your questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what do the rest of you guys think? I really honestly don't know. I know Radio City Revels was supposed to be their next film.
Right.
All
I
right,
think
that's
it
as
was
much
a
as I know.
bomb.
I never even saw it. Yeah, I didn't.
I have seen that movie, and it's oh, who was it? Jack Oakey and Milton Berle that played those roles that you could kind of tell were supposed to be them.
Mm.
Yeah.
But that movie was a major flop though. It lost $300,000 or something back then. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, they were better off not being in that one.
Yeah. What do the rest of you guys think? Like, I'm curious.
I think they could have gone into the 40s. I think about this a lot. I love Abbott Costello, uh, but I see, you know, Abbott Costello like humor in Clark and McCall shorts from 1929.
Mm.
I see it in Olson and Johnson films from the 1937. So I do think that the idea that it was a different kind of humor that took over in the 1940s is a little bit overblown sometimes. It's all brash, it's all Abbott Costello and Bob Hope. And I think that there was already some of that happening. I think the proof is in the films. You could see it. So I think uh, Bert and Bob could bring their energy and they could still have some of their, surrealistic stuff and, hoary old vaudeville jokes in there. And I think they could have gotten through into the 40s for at least a little bit. And then they probably would have gotten tired of the whole shebang anyway and called it quits, I think. But I could see them getting into 42, 43 and making a run for it. Why not?
You don't think they would have continued into the 50s? Because I could see them appearing on the Colgate Comedy Hour or something like that.
It's possible. It's hard to think about what Bob would have developed into.
Yeah.
Like we kind of know, the maturing Bert and how he ended up. And he was always Bert, but he kept becoming kind of the softer, gentler Bert as time went on. But he was always engaging, always pleasant, always funny. Um, what would have happened with Bob? I don't know. It's hard to say. Bob's one of those people that when you see him, you always think they're older than they were anyway, right? So he's kind of this this character. I don't know where he would have taken the character next. It would have been interesting to see, but I can't picture in my head what he would have done. But I think the sky was the limit for anybody in television in the early 50s. It just depended on your health and your energy, and if you had the ideas. Laurel and Hardy were going to do the Fabulous Fables, I think in color. An hour-long show where they did their versions of Fables with comedy mixed in. That didn't turn out. I think they had another idea for a show as well. Um, so I think anybody could have kind of gotten in there. And Colgate Comedy Hour, certainly. I would like to have seen them on that. How many times they would have been invited back, we don't know. But
I
you
th
know,
yeah, I mean, I think they could have stayed together for quite a while as a team. Maybe they would have split up again at some point to do their own stuff. But I do feel like the premature of death has something to do with the passing of Wheeler and Woolsey into obscurity. I feel
Yeah.
like they sort of passed out of the cultural consciousness because they look, Bob or Bert made a couple films and then he went back on stage. Had they kept going in the 40s and 50s, who knows what have happened. I do sense that they may not have been quite so uh, anonymous after a while. My dad, even as late as the 1950s, he went out. Bert came out. Bert would come out from back east to the west occasionally to try out for some TV shows. I think he tried out for Pistols and Petticoats, didn't
Mhm.
get that role. But he would meet up with my dad in like the late 50s, and they would walk along Hollywood Boulevard to the Roosevelt Hotel to get lunch. And even then, people still remembered who Bert was. Like everyone on the street, hey, Bert, hey, Bert. What would have happened if they had been making films in the 40s and 50s? Would they have been showing their stuff on TV? What would they have been showing? Uh,
Um,
yeah, that's a tantalizing thing to think about. But in that whole discussion, why did they sort of pass out of cultural consciousness? I do feel like the premature death of Bob definitely had a role to play there. And, it's just there was nothing to talk about after 1938, as far as Wheeler and Woolsey goes.
maybe there's an alternate reality where Bert teamed up with Bob Clark.
Yeah.
I was thinking, but I think that given like the what people were used to seeing Bert doing, I don't know if he can keep doing that when he's like 45 years old.
Right.
Like that, the sort of like the go-getter that with these like with with these younger actresses and all this. I mean,
Right.
like that was a big part in singing and dancing. That was all a big part of his act in
Yeah.
film. And I don't know that he can keep doing that. It was already getting a little strange by the time you get to like the last couple of movies they were in. It was like
Right.
with him and Marjorie Lord, who's like practically could be his daughter, really.
Right.
But
He was 42 at that point. Yeah.
yeah, he was already 42 then. So it's, I mean, I don't know how much longer he could have kept doing what he was doing in film. And it's just, he would have had to have rethought an entirely different character for himself almost.
I
Whereas
think
Woolsey
they
can
could
just,
have they could have altered his character slightly. I don't think that he would have had to create a new character though, you know? They could have altered him. Maybe he'd be married in the films as they got older. You know what I mean? Maybe Bert and Bob are married, like in a lot of the Laurel and Hardy films, of the 30s. Maybe something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
or they have nephews or something, nieces rather. The
yeah,
old W.C. Fields trick, give them a niece or a daughter. Um,
yeah,
yeah, that is a thing though. You look at a Harry Langdon or a Stan Laurel or Lou Costello, and it does become the type of thing where, they have these great childlike qualities, but as they get older, some of those things, you have to figure out, is there another way to do this where it doesn't look like, they're dating a high school girl or they're doing
yeah,
slapstick that would kill them, in real
yeah.
life,
For
that type of
me,
thing, how do you get to that point?
yeah, I would presume that that rumored Burt Wheeler, Dorothy Lee teamings in the 40s that never happened. That probably would have been them more as a little more of a married couple. That was
yeah, that would
something,
have been that. I
I
mean,
don't know,
as a
Tommy kind of stuff, maybe. I don't
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like as a selfish fan, I would have liked to see that just because there'd be more films out there for us to watch. But like how long, like how well that would have done, how long a series like that would have gone on for, who knows. But I wish they had tried it, Bert and Dottie after Bob was gone.
That would have been
Yeah.
magic.
I'm sure that would have been
It would
fun.
have been really cool. Yeah. What I was going to say real quick, teaser number two for our Hip Hip Hooray episode. To your point, Patrick, I'll just say this much. I'll just give a little bit of information. We were talking about how I had three of my grandparents were born in 1918. They all remembered Burton when I discovered Burton Bob in the early 90s. They all remembered them down to like the description of they hadn't seen them since the 30s. 60 years
Right.
had gone by, but they could but my grandma, who was born in 1927, remembered your great grandfather really well from radio and television, but she did not remember Bob at all, or that your great grandfather was even teamed with anyone at any point in his life. She
Wow.
always, yeah, she always knew your great grandfather as like the funny guy on radio and television. She was born
Right.
1927, so she was 10 years old when High Flyers came out and the team was over with. So she didn't even remember Bob. So that's almost how quickly it seems like that changed.
Right. Right.
You
Yeah. I
know?
mean, I've talked to people who have gone through the depression. It's rare to find somebody who doesn't recognize the name, actually. And, when you think Bert and Bob were around so much longer, even before they made the film feature Rio Rita.
Oh yeah.
Bert was around after that. I mean, his run really starts in the 1910s to until he died, in
Yeah.
1960s. So he's got a huge body of work. And anyone who lived during that time period and has paid attention, it's kind of hard to miss Bert.
Mhm.
He's just
Yeah.
he's kind of everywhere. And as I said, he was still able to walk down Hollywood, like Hollywood Boulevard in the 50s, and everyone still recognized him, which is saying
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
You know what's weird about that? Talking about the grandparents thing. My so this would be my maternal grandparents. They had never heard of Wheeler and Woolsey, and
Mhm.
they were born like
Wow.
in 1921. I mean, they were just like they had no idea. And then over the years, like my grandmother, I kind of like brought some of those movies over when she finally got a VHS player, and then like she didn't know who they were, but then she ended up really liking them. Like it's funny, she'd never seen any. I don't think she'd ever seen any of these movies at the time. She had no idea, but she like the thing that made her laugh the loudest was probably the dance number from Reno.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
I
That's
think it could be regional too sometimes. My mom was one of 14, and
Whoa.
yeah, whoa, whoa, indeed. And and my uncles would always say to me, they know I was into all this stuff. I was a dorky, classic comedy, film loving kid. And they'd be like, "What about the Rich Brothers? You like them?" And I'm like, "Who? I know Rich Crackers. I don't know Rich Brothers." Uh, but apparently in Passaic, New Jersey, where they were all growing up, the theater there must have run a lot of Rich Brothers movies. So I think sometimes too, it's where you are. Maybe you have relatives
Yeah,
who
maybe.
lived where there was a lot of Will and Woolsey movies playing in the theaters, and maybe you don't, you know?
Yeah, I mean they were
Uh,
like rural Kentucky, so I don't know if they maybe they just didn't have anything RKO related around that area. I don't know.
yeah, that's true because my dad's parents, both born in 1918, grew up in Brooklyn and Queens, so the city. So of course Wheeler and Woolsey would play there. And my mom's father, who just could describe them perfectly, grew up in Nyack, New York, which was all Italian. So they must have been huge with the Italians in New York because, yeah, they all remembered them. So like their films probably played really well there. I remember my grandpa said we used to go and see Wheeler and Woolsey like with like on a nickel or a dime. You'd go and we would stay there all day. So like we would go and see like Hips Tips Hooray and it would play like a short and then a cartoon and a reel and then we'd watch Hips Tips Hooray again. Like he remembered watching them like on a Saturday, going to see them like just staying in the theater all day and watching like the same Wheeler and Woolsey movies. So he really liked them back then.
that's the irony too of the whole thing that happened with TV, which is a big, huge chunk of the theater going audience in the 1930s was kids. And the
Yeah.
1950s broadcasters were like, we can't show these because kids might be watching. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wasn't thinking of it that way, but that's a good point.
Yeah, there was a line I remember in some book. It said like some of the Wheeler Woolsey stuff's a little too risque. It's like the kind of stuff you might not the junior wouldn't want to hear unless Junior was a member of the Algonquin Round Table.
But it would go over your head, you
No,
know?
exactly. Exactly. I mean, some of those lines that were cut out of So This Is Africa, it's like it made me wonder why other lines survived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like the I'm above that line from Peach Arena is like to
Right.
me one of the most incendiary lines. Um, I don't think a kid would necessarily even pick that up. You know what I
Nope.
mean? So
I think
yeah,
also this Africa is actually almost funnier because it has the stuff edited out of it. Because you're wondering, like, what did they say that was so bad that guy, like punchlines that go nowhere and stuff. You're just almost laughing at it. Like, you're just,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah. It's so weird watching that one because, like I said, it feels like you're just watching an old film print from at 3 in the morning. Like that's growing up in New York, I remember that. Like like when I was too young to stay up that late, but my dad would tape movies off of TV for me. Like he would just set the VCR, and so I'd be watching like I was a teenage werewolf or something, right? The next day, but it would be some battered print from Channel 9. So you'd have all the cuts and the scratches and the drop frames. That's to me what watching So This Is Africa is kind of like, which sucks. I wish the whole thing was available because it is such a strong film and they're so good in it and the musical numbers are so good and all the risque stuff really works well. But I obviously that's all we're ever going to get. Even if they released it on Blu-ray, maybe they clean up some of the scratches, but we're stuck with that really, really bad editing job. That that's how the film is shown in theaters with those really bad edits. It's so strange. That would never happen today, obviously.
Has anybody ever
yeah.
seen that on TV?
No.
This
Because
is
I mean,
Africa.
like a copy I have, well, it has TCM on the logo in the bottom corner of it. But I'm
Yeah,
like, I can't remember it ever being on. It must have been like the very first year before I even had the station or something.
yeah, that's what Rich Finnegan told me. I think he said they aired it a few times in like 93, 94, and then never again.
Yeah, because I've even requested it before, and they never played it. I don't know why. Because they show Columbia stuff. I mean, I don't know.
Probably has
I'd be
something to do with
curious to
Columbia.
find out where's that 90-minute fact come from? That the
Um,
90 minutes is 6 minutes. We got to drill down on that. Where does that come from?
Watts.
Well, yeah, it's
Who was
yeah.
that in Watts's
Well,
book?
So there was in the Watts chapter of his book. It has
Yeah.
like 90 minutes, and it said in the chapter that it was a 90-minute original cut that was previewed in San Bernardino or something, and then
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Okay.
but then I don't see where like 25 minutes was cut out of that movie. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
It's not a
the
lot of
only
no, sorry.
just real quick, just to defend, because I agree with the information we're given. There's no way it was 90 minutes. To defend what Watts, the information Watts may have received, I just want to, it could be that either he was told that or that there's material that has never been produced. Like no one's ever said, oh, there was this whole, like that we know nothing about. Like, oh, there was a 10-minute sequence here or there that we know nothing of. Because the only other thing that I've heard was that they said someone told Watts that the all of this stuff with the lions in that big hotel
Hmm.
was reinserted because other stuff was cut,
Huh.
but there's never been any specifics on what that other stuff was. So that's another reason why I don't think it was 90 minutes. I think it probably was 70 to 75, but just to play fair, I just, I'll
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
say
I'll defend Watts too. He's a great guy, and the book is phenomenal, and we're all enriched by it. Now, yes, are there a lot of 90-minute feature-length comedy films in the 1930s? That's a lot for just about anything that was released during that decade. When you think about the run times of Marx Brothers features and Laurel and Hardy features.
Well,
They
Animal Crackers is somewhere around that.
they hit the races like
Not too
100.
many.
It's long.
Yep.
they at the races could use some cut, some
It's
cutting.
Yeah,
ballet.
sometimes, yeah.
Oh my God.
That's where you need the scissors, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that Thalberg.
Mm.
Well, anyway, it's been over an hour, so we should probably wind up. Is there anything else?
Um,
I'll just say it's a pleasure to meet Anthony, Brian, and Patrick sort of in person on the screen for the first time. I've known you guys
What? It's not a pleasure to
uh,
see me. Come on,
on
Paul.
the online. Well, I've seen you in person, Andrew. That's a
Yes, you
whole.
have.
But
But the audience doesn't know that.
pleasure again to see you as well, Andrew. So thank you for thinking of me for this. Bert and Bob just made some amazing films that I wish a lot more people would open their minds and hearts to, and they would
Yes.
find some real enjoyment and I think also some amazement, some of the things they pulled off.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. This has really been fascinating. I said yesterday I like doing shows where I don't have to do any work. I can just sit here and listen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pleasure for me to talk to people who love Wheeler and Woolsey. It's a small club, growing bigger, but still small. We should stick together. We can have disagreements and whatnot, but anyway, I think part of the energy, speaking to Andrew's point about these videos, is like when you finally meet other people who can speak to the films and know about them and know like a lot about them, it's kind of energizing,
Yeah.
because most of the time, no, even when I tell people, yeah, I'm the great grandson of Bert Wheeler, and I just get the blank stare, that's like deflating. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man, this guy was world famous. So to talk to people who can speak intelligently and knowingly about this stuff, it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. So thank you for being here, guys. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Take
Same.
care.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.